What's going on, everybody? Today's video is going to be recapping my trip to London, where I spoke at my first ever conference, iOSCon 2019, as you can see here. So we're going to give you kind of the behind the scenes of what went down at the conference, how it went, what it's like at one of these conferences, kind of the last minute hustle in order to give Paul and I's, first live Swift Over Coffee podcast, tell that story, and just, see what I did in London. And I'm not gonna lie, this video is kind of for me. I wanted to kind of capture my story that I can always go back and watch, but I know many of you are curious how London went, so come on along this journey with me. All right, here we go. This cover picture is probably my favorite picture of the trip. Yes, I took that. It looks pretty cool. I like it. More on that later. More on my talk later. We're gonna start at the airport because it's like these planes, like I have never flown internationally before, right? I've flown continental US. These planes were like the biggest planes I've ever seen and I've ever been on. And these aren't even like the huge ones, like, right? You see the ones that go into Asia that are like double deckers. But anyway, the pictures don't do it justice, but I was marveling at like how big these planes were. It was kind of crazy. Forgive the huge shot of my arm and arm hair, but I wanted to talk about the funny story about, if you follow me, you may know that I'm closing my rings every day this year. That's my goal for 2019. Silly goal. I don't get a crazy reward. Just a fun thing I want to do. But I was worried because flying from California to London, it's an 8-hour time difference, not to mention, the time you're in the air. So I had to close my rings before my flight boarded in order to like not risk, not closing them. So my flight boards at like 3:45 and you see it's 3:30 here and I just closed my rings. 600 is my move goal. A lot of people ask me that, but you can see all the activity leading up to right at that time. So I'm just pacing up and down the terminal trying to close my rings before my flight. So silly, stupid goal. There's no reason to do that, but I don't know. I just thought that was funny, but we had success. We closed the rings by 3:30 in the afternoon and perfect year is still intact. So not much really happened on the first day. So I land in London. I say, this is my Instagram story. So if you're not following me on Instagram, there it is. Check it out. See some of my stories. But if you live in the Bay Area or you've been to the Bay Area and you've been on BART, which is Bay Area Rapid Transport, it's kind of like our subway system. It's not the greatest. So the Heathrow Express, going from the Heathrow Airport to London, was like the nicest train I've ever been on. So I had to take a picture about that and say, this ain't BART. That's for damn sure. Stark contrast. So, we get in, ride the Paddington Station. I like Paddington Station, look pretty cool. We don't have a ton of major train stations here in the States. I know in Europe it's probably pretty common, but so I was pretty enamored with this, thought this was pretty cool. Going into the London Underground, obviously it's pretty iconic, so I took that to my hotel. And basically that wraps up the day because I went home and just tried to crash. I was so jet lagged. I was working on my talk. I just couldn't sleep. I was messing around on the internet. It was a rough night. But I was just chilling in my hotel, so not much to show, but super jet lagged, couldn't sleep. It's going to be a trend here. So not much sleep happened, worked on my talk a little bit, but then we go into Wednesday, where Paul was our tour guide. He took around Kaya Thomas. She works at Slack. He took herself, Paul, and myself, went around London. I did all the touristy stuff. And Paul was a great tour guide because not only is he from this area, but he's also like a history buff. So it's kind of like having a professional tour guide walking you around London. So that was pretty cool. Thank you, Paul, for that if you're watching. But yeah, we hit up the Tower of London. Pretty cool stuff here. My favorite thing about London is just the dichotomy of like super old stuff, like you see here, next to like super modern buildings, as you can see in the glass in the background. It's just kind of filled with that stuff, like really old timey stuff and then super new modern stuff, like just right next to each other. It's pretty cool. I like that. More pictures of the Tower of London. And you got this weirdo in front of the, it's not the London Bridge, this is the Tower Bridge, I believe. The London Bridge is a separate thing. But this is probably the most, the famous bridge everybody knows about. And then this is the road leading to Buckingham Palace. Like when they do the royal wedding, it's the parade that, they kind of come up on. We got to see the changing of the guard, I believe it was called. For people that live in London or England, I'm probably going to butcher a lot of this stuff. They're probably going to bash me, but yeah, so that was pretty cool. The gates of Buckingham Palace were all gold. It's pretty cool. Again, more Buckingham Palace. Place was crowded. Place was insanely packed. I don't know if something was going on or if it's always like that, but yeah, it was insane. And then, of course, can't go to a major city and not go to the Apple store, So got a good picture of there. Pretty cool Apple store, a lot of trees. Went to the British Museum. There's Rosetta Stone. Took a bunch of pictures in there, but I'm trying to keep this pace up. So we're walking around London all day. I'm exhausted. And then we go right into the speakers' dinner/drinks. So this is where all the speakers get together. We have drinks. It's in a loud bar. that was the only downside. It is one of those bars where you had to like lean in and like yell at each other to talk. It was also hot as hell in there. I was like sweating. I was just sweating like crazy. So yeah, anyway, again, behind the scenes stuff of what was really going on. But this is Jorge Ortiz, another speaker at the conference. The funny story here, I shouldn't say funny, it's a pretty cool story, is that he was my instructor at my boot camp here in San Francisco back in 2015. Like when baby Sean was just learning how to code, Jorge was my teacher. And then 4 years later, we're speaking at the same conference and we got to catch up because I believe he lives in Spain. But we got to catch up and you know, see what was going on. But that was pretty cool. And then I also got to meet John Sindel for the first time. That was awesome. John and I actually hung out a lot over the weekend because ironically enough, our hotel rooms were right across from each other. Like wasn't planned. It was like, oh, hey, where are you staying? Oh, I'm staying at that hotel too. And then we're walking to the hotel. It's like, where's your room? Right there. Mine's right there. It's like, oh, okay, that's weird. But it makes sense, right? Because the conference is going to block off, you know, specific rooms for people. So, but anyway, John was pretty cool. Got to hang out with him a lot. Got to get to know him. Tweeted out this picture. A lot of you like to see all three of these kind of influencers in the same picture, but it was a fun time. Now on to Thursday. This is day one of the conference. This is when I give my talk. So, like I said, I didn't get any sleep Tuesday night when I arrived, you know, flying all day. We were walking around all day London. That's exhausting. Then we do the speaker's dinner. So I had a few drinks. When I got home, I again had trouble sleeping, even though I was walking all day and exhausted and had some drinks in me. So the day of my talk, I just feel like a zombie. Like I'm exhausted. John Sindel kicks off the conference with his decisions talk about how to make decisions in your code. That was pretty cool. Good to watch that. And then this is Monik. I met him at the speaker dinner. He gave an AR talk at the same time I did. But the funny story about this is that, so he lives in San Francisco. Like I walk by his office every day on my way to work. So it's kind of funny. I met a couple people from San Francisco, like in London. And now we're going to like hang out in San Francisco. So that's kind of funny how that happened. But the story here is, so all this time, like I said, the day before the conference, I'm walking around London, have the speaker's dinner. My talk's not quite ready. Like my talk was 30 Xcode tips in 45 minutes. So I had all that laid out, but the practicing of it and the pace and the order of which the tips are in, so it flows, and also just practicing because it's a live demo, like I wasn't quite ready, or I don't know if you ever feel ready enough. So we gave a talk at the same time. So basically right after John Sindel's opening keynote, which was at 9 a.m. and our talks were at noon, he and I just took off to a coffee shop and worked on our talks for like an hour and a half before we gave our talks. Again, I don't want to give the impression that we weren't prepared. Like the bulk of the talk was there, but it was more just the last minute practicing and really dialing it in. So here's me getting ready for my talk, you know, prepping all the audio visual stuff. It's pretty nerve-wracking, man. I'm not going to lie. Like I didn't think I'd be as nervous as I was, just because, you know, talking to the camera, doing YouTube videos, I'm used to being up and talking, but it's totally different. Like right now, I'm sitting in my apartment by myself looking at a camera, right? Nobody's around, but there's like 200 people in this room and lights are shining on you. And yeah, I was pretty nervous, but here we are prepping. Giving my talk, you know, we got to give the podcast plug, right? I can't do a video without plugging the podcast. And also talking about Aluna, the startup I work at. And then, yeah, going through live coding. So basically my talk was supposed to be about 45 minutes. And when I practiced it, I nailed the time, right? I was just on it, nailed it, done, good to go. However, when I'm nervous and up on stage, like I just talk fast and I flew through the talk. Like, I think I had like 8 minutes left after that because the way my talk was structured, again, it was 30 tips. So it's like if I fumbled on one tip or forgot to say something, my escape was just, okay, next tip, you know, number 3. So, you know, I missed a couple jokes I wanted to give in there. Overall, I think the talk went great and it got good reception. Everybody there said, oh, that was a great talk. I loved it. I would have never guessed that it was your first time speaking. But don't get me wrong. Nobody's going to come up to me and say, dude, you sucked. You know, so I understand I'm only getting like one side of it. But overall, for the first talk, I think it went pretty well. Xcode only messed up once. And that's like when I was running the simulator, like the cursor just went away. So I couldn't click on anything in the simulator. But that actually like endeared me to the audience because, you know, nobody's going to judge me for Xcode messing up because everybody in the audience is an iOS developer. So they know, like, so they laughed, they cheered. That was kind of like I said, it endeared me to the audience. So many people might look at Xcode crashing on you during a live talk as a bad thing, but it actually kind of helped out the talk, I think. But yeah, the talk went great. Again, we have live code up there. The funny story is I give a disclaimer at the beginning of my talk because I'm showing my real project. Like, this wasn't a contrived app just for this talk. Like, this is my real in development. This is Aluna, right? Like, I know I get permission to show as long as I don't show any proprietary stuff. And if you can see here, I'm showing like the login screen. Not a big deal. But anyway, my disclaimer was, hey, I'm going to show this code. This is real in development code. And I know from YouTube, like, anytime you show your code to developers, like, they get triggered and they'd be like, oh, you forgot to do this. Or, they start judging your code. And I don't blame them. I do it too. You show me some code, I'm going to start judging it. But I gave the disclaimer. I basically said that. I was like, hey, don't judge this. This is in development. This is about the Xcode tips. And when I finished my talk, the first words out of the dude's mouth was like, can you pull up your code? And I was like, come on. And the crowd like kind of laughed. I was like, come on, man, really? This is how we're starting it? It wasn't a code judgmental question. It was an actual legit question, but just the first words out of his mouth, can you pull up your code? Everybody started laughing. It was pretty funny. But yeah, I enjoyed the talk. It went well. And then like after the talk, just a huge weight was off my shoulders, right? So I think part of the reason why I couldn't sleep was the jet lag combined with the anxiety of like preparing for this talk and being nervous about the talk. So once the talk was over and I just got to watch the conference, like, huge relief. See if you can spot the iOS content creators in this picture. This next picture I just thought was funny. So first of all, again, I got to hang out with John all weekend. Super cool, super nice guy, super upbeat. But here in this picture, he's got a beer in his hand, just looks like he's, just doesn't look happy. But he is. And I just thought it was funny for that reason. I look like I'm having a blast, but I don't know, I thought that was a pretty funny picture. So anyway, after the conference, they have this bar called the Space Bar. But yeah, everybody just gets around, has drinks, talks. As you can see here, everybody's talking as a group. This guy to the right here, probably that was right above my head, he actually works at Coinbase and he's from San Francisco. So like I said, I met a bunch of people from San Francisco, like in London. It's kind of cool. So yeah, this is great. I mean, so the combination of people recognizing me from YouTube and being a speaker, like that's kind of like a double whammy that like, a lot of people wanted to talk to me, which was great. I got to meet a ton of people. Great conversations. However, like I think it took me like an hour and a half to try to leave this event. Like I'm like, all right, I'm heading out. I would take 2 steps towards the door. Somebody else would grab me. We'd have a 10-15 minute conversation. All right, I'm heading out. 2 steps towards the door. Somebody else grabs me. Like it took like an hour and a half to get from where I'm standing to those like steps in the background. It was kind of crazy, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. And then, like I said, that's a huge weight off my shoulders, that talk. I slept like a baby. I think I was finally getting over jet lag, and I think just no longer having that anxiety of my talk. I think I slept for like 10 or 11 hours that night, like hard sleep. The sleep where like it feels like you didn't move all night, like that kind of sleep. So when I woke up Friday morning, I felt like a new person, and I didn't have the anxiety of like giving a talk. Like, yeah, we had to give our live podcast, but that wasn't nearly as stressful as giving the talk. So Friday is day 2 of the conference. And let me tell the story about how we kind of prepared for Swift Over Coffee, the live one. So Paul and I don't know why we thought we had like 2 hours in between his talk and our podcast. We really only had 45 minutes. So we were like, yeah, we'll just do it after your talk, because he was still, prepping for his talk. So I was like, you do your talk, we'll prep Swift Over Coffee, and then we'll do it all good. Again, we only had 45 minutes, not 2 hours. So Paul gives this talk, I think at like 11:30 or something like that. We frantically go to a coffee shop, and because we realized like, oh shit, we only have 45 minutes, like holy crap. So we frantically leave the conference, go to a coffee shop across the street. We're throwing the slides together. What are we going to talk about? How are we going to do it? And the reason it was tricky is because we had just did an episode like 3 days before. So we made this episode all about what was going on at the conference. Like a couple news things broke, like the WWDC tickets. But for the most part, this was just all thrown together last minute, and because it was topical stuff that happened like an hour before was in our talk. So yeah, here we are on stage, literally mic'd up, people watching us 2 minutes behind our start time, putting together the slides last minute. It's kind of crazy, but it went off pretty well. And of course, we always look back and there's stuff that we wanted to do differently, but for that lack of prep time and just kind of getting up there and winging it, I think it went very, very well. I look like I'm really pissed off at Paul for some reason. I think this picture's funny. We're probably going to meme it for sure, but I look like I'm not too happy with Paul here. Here's just some kind of scale of the room. Again, I think there's probably about 150-ish, 200 people could fit in this room. That's kind of an idea of the scale there. And then, if you are a listener of Swift Over Coffee, we do the open ballot. So for this, we got to put the tweets up on the big screen while we talked about them, rather than just, reading them off on the podcast. And then this happened. So many of you probably have seen this tweet that kind of went a little mini viral. But if you haven't seen this tweet, let me tell the story behind this. So Paul and I give our podcast, and there's people that want to like take pictures and talk to us after the podcast. And then this girl, Connie, comes up. And first of all, she's wearing an 80s Apple computer shirt. So I was like, you had me at hello kind of thing. But I start talking to her mom. She's there with her mom. And they start telling me their story about how Connie loves to code, but she has to code on a borrowed 2011 MacBook Air. So it's super, super, not very performant. She goes to Apple stores on weekends just so she can access the playgrounds to code. She goes to a lot of meetups all over London. She's actually very well known kind of in the London community. But it was just, I don't want to go too much into her story because, personal reasons. But, she had all the drive and desire and talent to want to code. The only thing in her way was like the hardware and equipment. So anyway, I heard this story, really tugged on the heartstrings. And I didn't think about this idea right when I heard it, but we're walking around after this, because after this was the lunch break, I think, or in between talks, something like that. But I'm like thinking, and I'm like, I'm gonna go buy her a MacBook. Like this, I just kept thinking about it. I was like, man, like I hate the fact that like the only thing in her way is the lack of like a good machine. So I told Paul, I was like, Paul, I think I'm going to go, because Paul like knew her and talked to her, and I kind of like ran it by him. I was like, I have this, because that was my intuition, but I wanted to verify it, like, because I don't know, she's just a random 10-year-old girl. Like, is she going to quit coding 3 months from now? I don't know. And Paul had communication with her before, so I kind of verified with Paul, and he's like, yeah, that'll be that'll be worth it, is essentially what it was. So like, all right, let's do it. So I left the conference, going to the App Store. Here's Romain. You may have seen him on Twitter, follower of mine, also really big into AR. Give him a follow. He happened to be, we had talked on Twitter, like we definitely wanted to sit down and meet because we had interacted on Twitter a bunch. So I'm outside like waiting for my Uber, and he comes up, just the timing was great. And he had, I guess, spent some time with her as well, like going over her project. And he had already planned on like sponsoring her first year of the Apple developer account. So just kind of all kind of came together. And I was like, well, I'm going to buy her a MacBook and waiting for my Uber. He's like, do you mind if I come with you? I'm like, sure, hop in. So this is a picture of us in the Uber heading to the Apple store. And then here's me actually purchasing the MacBook. I didn't know he was filming this, but I'm glad he did actually. But anyway, this cracks me up, the old people in the Apple store. But this girl was so cool. Like she asked if I had like a business discount. I didn't, but jokingly I was like, well, do you have a good deed discount? And she's like, oh, let me go check with my manager. And I had told her the story because they have to wait to go get the MacBook. So we were talking for like 5 minutes. She had asked why I'm buying it, and told her the story, all that good stuff. So long story short, I ended up getting like a 10% discount on the MacBook, which on a MacBook is quite a lot of money. So that was pretty cool. So here's the thing. So I get the MacBook, and then we rush back to the conference because the conference ends at like 5:30 or 6, and this is like 4:30, right? I'm worried we're gonna miss her, and we did. I was devastated. I went and got this MacBook. By the time we got back to the conference, her and her mom had already left. They had to catch their train because they live like an hour and a half away. And I was crushed. Because don't get me wrong, I still would have mailed her the MacBook, but like I wanted to give it to her, see her face. Like that's the reward I got for the selfish reasons, right? Just seeing the look on her face. And if I would have had to mail it, like yeah, I know I would have done a good thing, but it wouldn't have had that same feeling. So I was crushed. But Romain, who you just saw, had their contact information because he runs a meetup in London, and they had like tried to go to his meetup. So we reached out and we lined up a lunch for the next day. So all is well. I get to deliver it. But at that time, like I was bummed. I was seriously bummed out. So anyway, yeah, after that, we had drinks. I'm lugging around this MacBook the whole time. Everybody's asking me, oh, you went and bought a MacBook? And I had to like tell the story a bunch of times. But yeah, after the drinks here, so it's Friday night. We all went to a bar called Brewdogs. I shouldn't say we all. Probably a group of about 10 to 15 of the speakers and attendees. And this isn't a picture of the actual night. This is a picture off Google. But this was the bar, and right above my head, this table here is where we were all kind of camped out and standing. And it was at night, and it was much more crowded, but pretty cool place. I enjoyed that. So out pretty late drinking on Friday, and then that leads into Saturday, which is the MacBook Delivery Day. And Saturday overall was pretty chill. Like we were going to meet for coffee/lunch at 11, and I got to deliver this MacBook. You see just like the look on her face. She doesn't know. Her mom told her she was coming here because I was going to help her with her code because she was working on her WWDC scholarship project, and she wanted to ask some questions. So she thought she was coming there for code with her help. But as you can see, no more 2011 MacBook Air. She gets the the MacBook, and then here's the $100 for the developer account. So yeah, she was thrilled. Like the look on her face like was amazing. She was clueless. She didn't know what was going on. She didn't know if it was real. She's like, is this like for me? Like what? So here we are setting up the MacBook. The other cool thing is she couldn't get dark mode. She couldn't even run Mojave on her old computer. And she wanted dark mode so bad. So I'm a huge dark mode fan myself. So we got to give her dark mode. That was cool. And then I just punched the mic. And then I shit you not, the very first thing she does, like the computer's open, she does command space, pulls up terminal. I was like, are you serious? Like a 10-year-old girl, the first thing she did on the computer was pull up terminal and start typing in it. I was like, this is awesome. So well worth it. So glad I did that. And I hope she creates just amazing, amazing things with that. So after that lunch, I go home, take a nap, because again, I'm a little hungover, not gonna lie. So I go home, take a nap, and then I'm just adventuring. I walked down the Thames, up and down on the South Bank, took some pictures along the way. That's a pretty cool building, the Shard there. So there's just pictures of me walking down the Thames in South Bank, Eye of London. So Big Ben, as you can see in the middle, was like under construction. It was or not construction, but I don't know, they were fixing something. But anyway, you couldn't really see it. But yeah, here's the cover picture, probably my favorite picture of the whole trip. But yeah, and then Sunday, I get to go to Bath where Paul lives. So Paul, invited me to come visit his home city, his home, to check it out, because what I liked about London is London feels like a big city. So it didn't have too much of a different vibe from walking around San Francisco. It wasn't the old-timey London or England, I'm sorry, that you might think, aside from some of the old historic stuff. But Bath was completely different. Bath was definitely felt like, a history kind of stuff. So here's my train ticket, London Paddington to Bath. It's like an hour and 40-minute train ride. But I did get to see some of the green, hilly areas of England, more so than just downtown London. It's kind of what all I saw there. So the train ride was pretty cool, pretty peaceful. I was in the quiet car, so I got to just sit and chill and decompress a bit. But here's the church at the center of Bath. Paul's walking around. So Bath has like all the Roman baths, whatever. But here's where Paul and I went to lunch, had a good proper Sunday roast. Didn't even know what that was until then, but I guess that's what you do on Sundays. There's the food. So here's one of the Roman baths. Again, there's a whole tour you can do around it. And again, Paul being the great tour guide he is and the history buff, definitely, again, I felt like I had a professional tour guide. It was pretty cool. So here's me touching the water. It wasn't hot. It was kind of warm, but it was still pretty cool because this is just the natural spring water. And there's me taking a picture of the church there. And then this is just more of the city of Bath. Just looked really, really cool. And the other cool thing about England and London is they have these parks everywhere. To me in San Francisco, this looks like a huge park. But he's like, no, that's a tiny one. And then, yeah, he showed it. There's just awesome parks everywhere. More historic Bath. More Bath. So this is a thing called the Circle. It's a bunch of apartment buildings just built in a circle. But I thought that was pretty cool. See Paul gazing into the distance. So here's a panoramic of it. Again, more Paul in the foreground. But it's pretty cool, some structure there. And then we went to Paul's house, and you may have seen this. We recorded his origin story. We did a live video. I felt not bad, because origin stories I like to go in depth, and they're usually about an hour long. But we were walking around Bath for too long, and we're just tired. Basically, we had to jam this origin story into a half hour. So it was kind of rapid fire, but we still got it done, and we got a video version, and it was a lot of fun. So definitely check that out on the podcast plug, if you haven't. And then back to Paddington Station, back to my hotel, and then Monday I fly back to SF. The flight back wasn't bad for jet lag, so that was pretty cool. But that wraps up the London trip. Hope you enjoyed it. Again, this video was more for me. I understand some of the touristy parts might be a little boring, but I wanted a historic reference of my trip. And if you're interested, you can follow along. We'll see you in the next video.